Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Building in Public SIX Summit. I'm pleased to introduce the CEO of SIX, Daniel Barankin, and the COO, Bianca Pisciola. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, the summit has 3 parts. First, Daniel will describe the concept of building in public and the benefits for investors and companies. Then we will share a video of public company executives describing their experience building in public on the SIX platform. After the presentation, we will open the floor up for a live Q&A with Daniel and Bianca. So please remember, you can submit your questions at any time on the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will get to them after the presentation. And as always, the summit is being recorded and will be available to watch afterwards on six.com. So without any further ado, I will kick things off with Daniel.
Our mission at SIX is to unlock social mobility on a global scale by empowering anyone from anywhere to invest anything. And fundamentally, this mission is about participation. It's about giving more people around the world access to the investment opportunities around them so that they have more control over their financial destinies. This is a big, audacious, difficult goal. And the question is naturally, well, how do we do that? What about our activities and our operations contributes to this mission? And really, it's the way that we help companies in particular to deliver great investor experiences for self-directed investors by building in public that has the most impact. And so there's a few concepts here. The first concept is this idea of a company delivering a great investor experience. For a very long time, the delivery mechanism between an investment opportunity and someone ultimately investing in it was an intermediary, like an investment bank or a broker. We're flipping this model on its head by having companies go direct to investors. And in turn, investors have direct access to companies. And so this first component, this delivery mechanism, is fundamentally altered and transformed as a result of our on-the-ground approach. The second aspect is we're shifting the duty of care away from a focus on institutions over to self-directed individuals and self-directed investors, which you can think of as the smallest atomic unit of an investment. Think of people that may have very, very small amounts of money to invest relative to a larger institution. And so we're shifting this model on its head, where not only are we empowering companies to go direct, we're saying go direct to the least consequential investor possible and deliver a great investor experience. And what's notable about a great investor experience is that the adjudicator is the investor. And it's the investor's criteria that determines whether or not the experience is great or horrible. And so, of course, one aspect is there a positive return on investment? But that's not the only measure of a positive investor experience. There's other aspects like how open, transparent, and connected do I feel with the company? And it's on those ideas around how to deliver a great investor experience to self-directed investors that comes the question, well, how do you do it? And the answer we present is by building in public. This concept of bringing all of the things that are happening behind the surface in boardrooms and closed doors, behind closed doors, I should say, and bring that to the surface so that anyone from anywhere can participate. They can attend, they can consume, they can contribute, with the view being that this becomes a new model around how companies get built. And the question is why? Why do this? Why build in public? And so I'll start with the benefits for companies, and I'll move on over to the benefits of other stakeholders. For companies, the benefit is that it allows a greater universe of investment capital to flow your way. Nothing about building in public precludes institutions or other large investors from participating. There's no cost in the sense of the traditional capital. All of that can still happen. But what's shifting is that by being a lot more public and accessible, you now have a broader community of individuals, of stakeholders, of governments, of other entities that can follow along and support you along the way, that can, for example, apply to job posts that you have, that can, for example, make smaller or in some cases even larger investments because they can discover you. And so the benefits to companies are quite massive. And it can be things such as social license, things such as more support from their community, as well as capital, and of course, the liquidity and capital formation benefits that follow. For investors, the benefits of building in public is that the barriers of accessing information are reduced. Today, ordinary investors don't have that much access to financial markets. They do from their smartphone have access to hundreds of thousands of different publicly traded opportunities. However, access to information is still very, very difficult, and they are at a structural disadvantage when compared to institutions or people that are connected. And so the massive benefit of building in public, especially when you have a movement of companies adopting this sort of methodology, is that investors get more choices, they get more empowered, they have more selection. And with that, they can learn more about the industries that they're interested in. And that knowledge can help them both in making better investment decisions, as well as in understanding how the world around them gets built, with the view that they can ultimately participate in that through their own investments or by building or contributing to companies and using this as a tool for greater information gathering and greater impact. And so the concept of building in public is really this methodology of going direct and having a first-party relationship that isn't intermediated by having a duty of care to the otherwise smallest unit of stakeholder, and to have that duty of care result in transparency, openness, and doing it in a way where you're building in public, where you're bringing forward the ideas and decisions and bringing that out to the open and inviting people in.
Great. Now we're going to watch a video of the executives of public companies describing their experience building in public on the SIX platform.
It's been phenomenal. We've been with SIX, I believe, for almost a year now, maybe a little over a year. Their outreach has been fabulous. Their summits have been very, very professional. Carrie and I have been doing a few webinars before we started with SIX, and as soon as we switched over to SIX, it was the easiest and the most seamless sort of transition for us to work with and to get our shareholders more involved and informed on the progress of the company.
Yeah, no, the SIX platform has helped me kind of share the Gold Shore story with a broad base of people through company updates and the summits we've had. So it's really reached a community of investors that we wouldn't or didn't otherwise have. So through the various mediums that you guys have helped me with, I can see that we've reached a number more people than I otherwise would have. So, and a good example is the increase in our mailing list by over 1,300 in just a very, very short period of time, just under a month. So as a relatively new company, SIX has been a really, really strong resource for me to get out of the gates running and to get the awareness and get the story out there to as many eyes as possible.
It's been a great experience. I have just started working in the resource sector and the capital markets sector over the last year. And so my introduction of partnering with SIX to make sure that Step Gold story goes out has been a fantastic one, very positive. And we've been able to explore really innovative, creative solutions in terms of getting our story out. So it's not the same old webinar with the same old investor presentation, but ensuring that we're collaborating with our peers across the sector. So I've enjoyed the experience immensely.
It has been very, very good. Thank you. Thank you for asking. What we see in Monarca is the opportunity to expand the base of investors, current investors and potential investors, not only institutional but retail. So this is very important for us because we can spread the word about the job we are doing, and we increase liquidity for the investors as well. And we have a good share price that it's, generally speaking, very positive. So I think a big portion of these good results is having the opportunity to have access to a platform such as SIX and the services provided by SIX that are helping us on the promotion of the company and also on a very affordable cost.
The SIX experience has been fantastic. The team's very knowledgeable, responsive, and I would say passionate about what they do. Most importantly, you guys deliver. The team's always been available and ready to execute effectively all of our marketing strategies. So overall, it's been great so far.
The 6 summits really enjoyed the participation in that, especially the one where we had 3 companies working in Alaska. That was a very directed message to investors. It was well handled, well executed, with good questions, a good Q&A period, and the format was such that companies had the ability to talk about their strengths and as a company, but in the context of doing business in Alaska. So it was I think it was a great format for getting your message out.
Well, it's helped obviously through the webinars that we spoke about before. The marketing has helped as well. They've taught old guys like myself and Carrie of what needs to be done to grow our shareholder base, and they've done an absolutely fabulous job. I would go through some of the numbers here, but they're too good to share, and we want to keep it to ourselves. But our email subscriber list has grown way bigger than I could ever have imagined, and I think a lot of this, most of it, might have to do with the signing up with SIX.
I think there's been a whole variety of mediums that SIX has kind of suggested to Goldshore and to me. A number of ones I wouldn't otherwise have thought of approaching. The social media platform was very important to me and to Goldshore. We simply don't have the bandwidth as an early stage, developing company to be able to have the IR reach that we need. And we need help with that. And I think SIX has really kind of filled that gap, filled that role, and actually taken it to the next level. So we're now working on very, very proactive things for the future rather than anything reactive from the past.
I think the use of SIX's technology is the strength of this partnership. And once again, we have been able to see that through delivering on new viewer experiences, reaching out to new potential investors by not delivering the same old investor presentation over and over again. Step Gold is really proud to have been one of the first companies in partnership with SIX to launch the fireside chat multi-company concept. And we look forward to continuing to run with that. We think there are so many good news stories to share across the resource and capital market sectors. And we hope to partner with many of our other peers in doing that. And part of that, once again, is through SIX's innovation. And their great customer service whenever we deal with them.
Very interesting. What we've been seeing, it's every time we are reaching more people that, it's very difficult to connect in a different ways. Through the promotion, social media, and the events, not only the webinars or summit as SIX called it, but also a couple of panels I participate about silver in this case, allowed us to talk to the people and people in Mexico, in the US, in Europe, and of course in Canada. So it's opening more opportunities to spread the message, to have more visibility among investors, not only Canadian, but international investors, which is great.
I can attest, SIX has helped share the Bunker Hill story broadly across networks that we otherwise wouldn't have tapped into. The six summits especially have always been very well attended with, I would say, a very engaged mining focused audience, which has helped broaden our investor reach. Ways in which Six has helped grow our community is your drip campaign and the management of our social media platforms by creating new content and advertising our events to help maintain the flow of information on the Bunker Hill News to keep our clients engaged throughout the entire process.
Well, Contango is a new story, so we're starting from a very low base in terms of investor knowledge. So, and we're doing that in an environment where we have the COVID pandemic and the inability to travel and do things sort of the old traditional way of meeting investors face to face. So the six format has really worked well for us to develop a good size outreach and investor base in a brand new story. And I'd say almost nobody knew about this story a little over a year ago when we started the relationship with Six, and couldn't be more pleased with where we're at now. We've got a good group of shareholders following the story and a lot of keen interest in what we're doing. I think we've got a fantastic story, but you need a good platform on which to tell it. And I think Six provides that. So we're really, really pleased with the work and relationship that we've developed with Six over the last year.
All right. Well, now we're going to jump right into the live Q&A. So if you do have a question, please submit it now. But to kick things off, I just wanted to get more information on what you think the risks and benefits are of building in public.
Yeah, well, I would say that, like all things, when you put yourself out there, there's definitely a element of risk, because in the same way that investors can see and celebrate all of your accomplishments and all your wins and can follow your story from beginning to end, they will also see everything, but I think that the double-edged side of this coin is what makes the relationships that come out of building in public so genuine and honest, full of transparency and trust. And that's something that is hard to do on a one-to-many level. I mean, think about the relationships that you're able to foster in your life, the people that you see every day, your friends, your colleagues, your family. They see you when you're at your best and at your worst. It's hard to do that when you're trying to build for an investor base that's a global community. There's hundreds of or thousands of individuals who are demanding your time. So, I think that in seeing the ups, the downs, and seeing the transparency, yes, there are pros and cons to building public, but I think the relationship is more meaningful for it. One of the examples of that I saw, sort of a micro version of building in public, is I remember a few years ago, a company that we were working with, they had a pretty contentious press release that a lot of investors were really not thrilled about. And at the time, there was all this negative sentiment around it, to the point where people were commenting on Twitter, about the CEO and just, really, really very negative about the whole experience. And what this CEO decided to do, which was very, ahead of the time, this might have been 2017 or 2018, he decided to hop on Twitter himself, which is not necessarily the place that he would regularly be found, and acknowledge, yeah, you're right. You have a right to be upset and angry, and we understand why you are. And here's why this happened. And here's why we made these decisions. But if you followed us up to this point, and if you believe in the story, those things are still true. And here's how we're going to make the world better moving forward, and how we're going to make the story better moving forward. And immediately, the whole dynamic changed, where investors were, exceptionally positive and congratulatory because of that building in public, because they have that relationship. It's very easy to be upset when you don't have a relationship with the people that you wanted to trust. So I guess it's all to say that while there are certainly pros and cons to building in public, I would say even the cons can create their own pros through the transparency and the trust that it builds.
Right, absolutely. And I guess I'm curious to why companies are building in public now and why hasn't this happened before?
I think for a very long time it was immensely difficult to build in public. If we think back, for example, up until even before the 2000s, there was a mass media infrastructure. And what that meant is that if you're public, you'd really be public in front of everyone. And the difficulty is that, first of all, the stakes would be much, much higher. To be public would mean national attention. It would mean everyone is looking at you and everyone is scrutinizing you and you're reaching a massive, massive audience. What that would also mean is that it's really difficult to get onto that stage. And usually those people and companies which did get onto that stage were doing so often due to negative reactions from communities. What shifted over the last 20 years in particular, and what's really prominent now, is that you can have many micro communities and micro medias that emerge. And so today you can build in public, and that public might be 300 people that attend an event or 1,000 people that attend an event consistently. And what's interesting about this is that as you're doing this, rather than reaching everyone, where the stakes are much, much higher and it's also much more difficult, instead you can curate and share with a community that's specifically built around you. And what's more is you can contribute to that community, you can foster it, you can encourage things like networking between community members. And so the tools that we have today, as well as how the media landscape itself has shifted, allows for building in public in a way that never previously existed. The other aspect as to why now is that as this landscape has shifted, the way that people consume media has changed and the way people make investments has also shifted. Whereas in the past, most people wouldn't participate in the capital markets. Today we see almost everyone is participating. With Robinhood's upcoming IPO, with Coinbase, which just recently launched an IPO for the crypto markets, we can see quantitatively the total number of people that are participating in the capital and stock markets. And what's really interesting is that their method to participate, unlike in the past, isn't intermediated through a broker-dealer or through a financial advisor in every case. In many cases, in fact, it's done directly through their mobile phone, where the mobile phone has become their most trusted financial advisor. And so to answer the question of why now, why are we seeing this type of shift now? Part of it is the technological advancements that have made it happen and made it possible to have this sort of communication. And the other aspect is the shift in behavior on the part of investors, where this behavior is happening at such a scale that if you do build in public, even as an early young company that might not warrant that national attention 50 years ago, you can still draw a really large audience.
Great, thank you. What does SIX have to do with building a public when it comes to companies and investors?
Yeah, so SIX is an opportunity for investors and companies to come together and connect on a medium that allows for that one-to-many communication. So the way I tend to describe SIX is an arena, and those seats in that arena are filled with investors from all over the world with different investment theses and different interests, and they're there to see these public companies. And it's the companies that make up the content that fills that arena. And so in that way, through coming together in forms like the one we're in right now, they're able to build in public, to share their story, to communicate catalyst events, to introduce their team to folks in a way that would be very, very difficult to do on a one-to-one level. And similarly, on the investor side of things, these investors are able to conduct their own due diligence in public. They can communicate with their peers in the live chat of these summits and learn together. And I think it's that collective learning, that collective thought leadership, the fact that it's all happening in public, live, the fact that the proximity that these investors are able to have towards the management teams of the companies that they're invested in, all of that is what constitutes building in public. And I'm very grateful that we can play a role in that shift.
Absolutely. We have a question here. How does your philosophy of building in public differ from traditional approaches to marketing?
So in terms of the traditional approaches to marketing, I think most marketing traditionally has been a one-to-many style of communication. Think of this as like a broadcast, where people will often in a boardroom think about the messaging and the ideas and the imagery that they want to present to the world. They'll then buy a television slot, let's say, And then during the Super Bowl, you might see a television ad. And even though you might have a lot of people yelling at the screens as they watch the Super Bowl, usually not at the ad, but let's imagine a scenario where they are getting that reaction to an ad, and they're trying to engage. The people that put out the message in the first place never hear it. There's no dialogue. And that's the fundamental shift between what traditional marketing is and between building in public, where the idea of building in public is that if anything that you're doing feels like marketing, you're probably doing it wrong. Really, it should feel like a conversation. It should feel like a dialogue. It should invite people in. And a lot of the conversation should be dynamic, where it's not just broadcast messaging. Instead, it's a form of communication where relationships are able to thrive. And the glue for it is trust. And therefore, there's that mutual sense of ethics and stakes that glues it together.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Bob is asking a question here. He's asking, on average, how many viewers attend these live webinars? He recognizes that the users can interact and direct message, but he's looking for an average ballpark number.
Yeah, in terms of the average ballpark, certainly it ranges. These live events can host up to 10,000 investors at once, so there's certainly no cap there. One of the benchmarks that I like to set for a new client who's never done a summit with us before is I'd like to see at least 100 registrants on your first summit. That being said, we've seen folks quite frequently surpass that benchmark. A few names come to mind. White Gold, their first summit, they saw over 600 registrants. First Mining Gold, their first summit, saw over 500. And that's not abnormal. But it's through that first summit that we can see what was that initial investor sentiment, how many folks were interested, from what communities, and we can adjust our expectations from there.
Yeah, by means of, I guess, direct statistics. So since launching the Summit platform about a year ago, we've had about 50,000 people register and attend events directly. And that's been across about 200 events. And so I think the technical average would be about 250 people per event. And then we usually see that as a bell curve based on what the event is, who's hosting it, and those sorts of things.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question here is, how do you expect your suite of tools and resources for investors and companies alike to grow and evolve?
So I'll start with one really recent addition, in fact, and we're launching this even more fully later next month, which has been the analytics infrastructure. And so increasingly, we're able to see all of the behavior of who's attending events, what other events they've attended, how engaged they are during the event. So if they have multiple screens open or just a single screen, how they self-identify, whether they view themselves as a retail investor or accredited or part of an institution or corporate. And all these various different demographic data, and we've structured it in such a way that makes it really easy for investor relation professionals and CEOs and boards of directors to understand how their community is growing. And importantly, to also understand what sorts of things are appreciated by the community and what sorts of things aren't. And so all this analytical infrastructure is allowing for a much more sophisticated decision-making as it relates to things like how often to host events, what sort of content should be in those events, who should speak at those events. What's really neat, and this I think also addresses a question earlier around what's shifting between traditional media and building in public, is that from the data, what we can see is that the big shift is that rather than wanting really large updates infrequently, so imagine on a quarterly basis or yearly basis, we're seeing that communities want constant daily updates. And the more content and the more engagement and the more avenues there are for people to participate, the more favorably they react. And this is something that's very, very new as it relates to traditional media. And we can see that right in the data. And so we can use that to make decisions. The other aspect in terms of how the platform is evolving, and I'll speak first of the investor experience. One of the big initiatives that we have now, and this is something that's going live in August, is to create a fantastic search experience so that as an end user, as an investor that goes onto Six, you can really use Six fully as a discovery platform where you can type in various different criteria, whether that criteria is based around the sorts of companies that are being run, their market cap, their size, what commodities or themes they have exposure to, all these various different avenues. And as an investor, you can filter this growing universe of investment opportunities to those preferences that are most specific to you. And what's more is that as you curate your own preferences, the experience you'll have on the platform will be personalized based on those preferences. So if you want to see more of certain style of events or of certain kinds of company presentations and fewer of others, you're able to make that entire experience your own, with all of it being saved and with more and more community tools built in, so that as a participant at one of these events, you can more easily network and use this as a tool, not just to discover the capital markets, but to fully participate within it by speaking with other investors, other analysts, and of course, the company management directly.
Great, thank you. Our next question here is, how many users visit your platform on a daily basis? Just looking for average numbers.
Sure, so we see about 30,000 people using the platform on a monthly basis. On a daily basis, it can vary quite widely based on how many events. So for example, I think on some of the most busy days, we've seen, I think, 5 or 6 events simultaneously on the same day. Other times there's fewer events. Usually we don't see very much usage on Saturday or Sunday, since we tend not to host events there. And so usage very much corresponds directly with the events that are being hosted.
Great, thanks so much. In your opinion, what is the best modern day success story of a company building in public?
It's a really good, it's a good question. You know, it's tough because I would want to commend various companies for elements of building in public. I know in a previous summit in this series, I gave an honorable mention to the Gold Corp Challenge, and I would extend that as a really early example of building in public. For those who are unfamiliar, I think it was in the year 2000 where Gold Corp challenged the broad community to tell them where they should drill, and folks who were submitting a variety of different plans backed up by the data that they had made public about their project. I think that's an example of building in public. I think that, you know, when people think about building in public in terms of, you know, modern company examples, I feel like companies like Tesla come to mind because of how perceivably accessible someone like Elon Musk is through his communication style online. And it's tough because I do see elements across a variety of different companies. And I think the fact that there isn't a one-size-fits-all example of like, this is a company that's truly building in public right now, I think indicates that we're at the crux of something really interesting, that we're seeing folks adapt. Quality is not entirely yet. I think that this would be a much more obvious answer in about 5 to 10 years as folks continue to adapt and evolve their strategies. Right now, we're seeing a lot of early movers, but I don't think there is that full adoption as of yet. So I guess we'll see. At least that's my perception on it.
To add in a few examples, and I'll actually reference some very old examples, WordPress and the company behind this, Automatic, is, I would say, one of the earliest examples of really building a company in public. And what's really interesting around kind of this case study is that their software is primarily open sourced, and their software is WordPress, which powers about 1/3 of the entire internet. And the really unique opportunity that they had is, as a software company, they're able to go and not just build in public from the perspective of inviting people in, but allowing people to go behind the code and write the code and change it. Another really great example of a company building in public is Wikipedia, where around the world we've amassed over the past, I think since its launch almost 2 decades ago, this massive database of pages and of content and of community, where from, if my stats are correct, and this might have changed recently, but they have thousands of different editors and individuals that are creating different pages that are subject matter experts, and they're contributing to this. The characteristic of building in public is participation. And that participation can come in a number of different ways. And for some industries, software in particular, it can be easier because if it's code, anyone can access it and contribute. With other industries, like let's say mining, it's not as easy, though there are ways to do it. And the more that you're able to bring what's happening behind the scenes to the surface, whether it's an asset like the code base or communication and discussions and dialogues, much the way that we see with Tesla, for example, and all of these sorts of aspects, the more that there is that openness, the more people tend to participate.
Great, thank you so much. Another question from Bob here He's asking, who does the promotion or the advertising of the summits to investors? Is it mainly depending on the client's email and newsletter subscription base, or can he rely on SIX to help engage with new investors and have the summit reach a higher number of registrants?
So the answer is yes on both counts. So there is certainly an aspect of leveraging your own audience. And the reason for that is that naturally the folks that want to participate already know who you are. But one of the big challenges, especially for early stage companies, and often especially for mining companies, is that audience isn't that large. And in fact, it's often an audience that has been around for many, many years that you know personally. And the challenge is, how do you expand it? And so within the SIX Investor Experience platform, we built about 10 modules ranging from ads, email, social media, all the way through to video production and creative image production, and of course, hosting the summits themselves, for the express purpose of being able to have and invite more people to go and actually participate in these events. So one of the channels, of course, is the SIX Investor newsletter, which I'm sure many folks who are here received and receive that on a daily basis. And so that's one vehicle of discovery. Another way people discover events is they go directly to the website, and we see this behavior is very, very common, and that we see that it's being used increasingly as an investment discovery tool. The other aspect is we built this massive proprietary technology to run really effective digital advertising. One of the challenges that we saw in this space when we began about 5 years ago was that it was almost impossible to use any sort of digital advertising, whether it was Google or Facebook or Reddit or whatever the case may be, to target an audience of people that actually care about what they're seeing. And so to that extent, what we've done is we've mapped out the universe of investors that participate in the mining sector as well as in other sectors. We have about 200 million rows of proprietary data, including, of course, details about people who are attending our events, so we can personalize their preferences. And as a result, we can run a lot more personalized ads. And we see that the effect of these ads in the most recent study that we ran was a 2,300% greater budget efficiency as it relates on dollar to dollar spend. We saw that we would bring costs down from acquiring a investor newsletter subscriber from hundreds of dollars to single digit dollars. So we were able to do that and replicate it on a consistent basis, which is really something that's quite massive. And then many of those people who discover companies that we work with and that are using the Investor Experience platform from an advertising channel then go on to discover the company and attend the company's events. And increasingly they become immersed and a participant in the community.
Great, thank you. We have a few more questions here. Bob was asking, I think, about how people navigate the site. So he was asking, where can, let's say, his wife register on the SIX platform to watch and curate to her own interests?
So right now, one of the best pages is the browse event page. And what you're able to do from that page in particular is you can sort events based on the company. So if you know, generally speaking, which companies you're most interested in, like let's say, for example, you wanted to see an archive of all of SIX's events specifically, you can run a query and filter it just to see our events. We're launching a major update in the next little while that's going to allow for those search to be a lot more powerful, where you can just type in a search bar what you're looking for, and you can use any sort of natural language you can imagine, and you'll then see many types of results. But I would say that the browse events page is probably the best. The other aspect is if you are wanting to be notified specifically of companies, you can go to the company's dedicated page and put in your email. And in that case, you'll be specifically notified about events that are hosted by that company. So of any upcoming event or past event.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question here is from Bob. How come your team is so helpful? What are your backgrounds? And thank you for this presentation.
Well, first of all, thank you for that. And I'm really happy to hear that. I think more than backgrounds, it comes down to values. And one of the core values that we have is we hire passionate people. We look for people that really care, and in particular, that care about our mission. One of the really common discussions that we have at SIX internally, and often in public as well, is this idea of why are we doing this? And at the center of it is this desire for impact, the desire to have a positive impact on the world, in specifically the ability of giving other people more control over their financial destinies. And so we spent a lot of time recruiting, a lot of time hiring. And what's really been magical is that the people that we've hired, as you're experiencing, just blow us away each and every time. And I think that comes down to the values of the people that joined.
You have anything to add?
I will first, I entirely agree, and I appreciate the compliment, Bob. That's very, very kind. The thing that I realize as we grow and evolve as an organization is it really comes down to those value systems, because I've met so many tremendously exceptional people through developing Six, who've been exceptional in other categories of their life. And I think that is such a unique element that we've been able to maintain within our team, is that they all have such a wide, vast background of different skills and abilities, but independent, they've all reached heights in their respective fields that I would deem tremendously exceptional. And I think that a lot of folks would deem very exceptional. And I think that is something that between myself and Daniel, we decided it was tremendously important to us at a very early point in the company culture. And I think the fact that we've been able to maintain that and have been able to meet so many exceptional people is just fantastic. I'm feel very, very grateful. And I'm very grateful that people like you, Bob, come to our events. So thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you both so much for taking us through the presentation and the Q&A. And of course, thank you for everyone who joined us today and submitted questions. If you want to learn more about the story of Six, there's a handout in the handouts tab available for download. You can also find more information on our website, www.six.com. And I'll hand it back to you, Daniel, just for the final word.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for attending. This idea of building in public, this is it. And I hope that the experience we've had shows the kind of the transformation that's happened, where in the past, I don't think that companies have been as open. And the promise is that if this building in public movement works, and we're seeing increasing evidence that it does, we can see a complete shift in capitalism where it's entirely much more open, much more transparent, where people feel connected with how the future gets built, and where companies, by building in public and allowing for all that to happen, are able to succeed to higher and higher heights. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.